activist and journalist Masih Alinejad joins me now. Masih, good to have you with us. Obviously, we saw these funeral processions for Khamenei, and you, I know, posted quite a bit about what was going on in the crowd there. And then Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the former leader, who's supposedly in charge right now, didn't even show up for his father's funeral. And here's what he says about avenging the death of his family members, including his father. We pledge to avenge your pure blood. This vengeance is what our nation is demanding, and this must definitely be done. We must know that this action doesn't depend on my presence or that of any other official, whether we are here or not. This will be done. The plot to kill President Trump.
Let's be very clear. First of all, that was not just a funeral. It was a terrorist summit. Look at the guest list. From Hamas, Houthi, Hezbollah, from Russia to China to Iraq. So that actually shows you that they gathered the most repressive regimes and their proxies in the funeral of Ali Khamenei to show off to the rest of the world that he was beloved. He was not. He was the most hated leader in Iran. And that's why the moment the news came out, President Trump said, Ali Khamenei is dead. Iranians took to the street to celebrate the death of their oppressor. Second of all, I have to say that they really hate President Trump because President Trump is clear that he doesn't want to bow to this regime, and his language is language of pressure. And that's why I don't think this is just Mujtaba talking about revenge, killing President Trump. It is Ghalibaf as well. Araqchi should be in charge of this language as well. This is the IRGC. This is the entire regime. They cannot play a game and saying that, you know, the conservative part, the hardliners saying that, but the reformists, the good part of the regime want to negotiate with America. Not at all. This is in the DNA of the Islamic Republic. They want to kill President Trump, and believe me, they will find a way to do it. Look, as a person who survived 3 assassination plots, I am very pleased and I feel blessed to be protected by the United States of America, by the FBI. And that should be a lesson for the rest of the world, that this is how you fight back against transnational repression. America did a great job to embarrass the Islamic Republic 3 times. And that should be a tactic and a strategic plan for the rest of the world, because the regime in Iran, using Russian mobsters, using its proxies to actually target dissidents and their opponents on U.S. soil, on Western soil.
So one of the factors that we've discussed a lot is how to topple this regime and who could replace it. Interesting story, which I just spoke to Ambassador Huckabee about today, that the New York Times released, that says that Ahmadinejad, the former president and one of the most, as you pointed out, aggressive in terms of carrying out executions of dissidents in Iran, potentially became some sort of Israeli asset leading up to the February 28th attacks, if this timeline is correct. Do you believe that this is true about Ahmadinejad, that he's been co-opted by the Israelis?
I believe that. Martha, Ahmadinejad was the one, like, literally hungry of power. And he was the one in 2009 actually helped the IRGC to kill innocent protesters. In charge of what? Spying for Israel, working with the hostile government, means America. And suddenly he lost power, and now he is seeking to get back to power. Who can help him? The Israeli government, the American government. Yes, he was begging for this. And I think he has to pay the price as well, because that was innocent people actually being prosecuted by him. And I want to tell you that I'm really shocked that if the Israeli government or American government literally thought that he can be the one helping the regime to be reformed, no way. This regime is a terrorist regime, and any of these governments, either they call themselves reformists or less hardliner, or sometimes, as President Trump called them, reasonable, they're just reasonable killers. So for me and millions of Iranians, there's only one solution. The U.S. government must take lead We need a powerful leadership, the US government, to get their allies, the Europeans, to isolate the Islamic Republic. I want to warn that again. Transnational repression became a tool in the hand of the Islamic Republic. We managed to codify transnational repression in the United States of America as a crime against humanity.
Well, I remember when Ahmadinejad used to come to the UN and you would lose your mind over why he was allowed into the country. We're going to have to go to South Carolina. Masih, thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.